So when I'm looking at you there, like, first thing I want to talk about is like picking on a bass, because it's completely. I used to be a guitar player. You are still a guitar player. When you moved to bass, what did you stay with that same style of picking you were doing, or was there any tweaks that you made to it? And obviously, some of that riff you're doing alternate picking, some you're only doing down picking as well. Like,
yeah. So I guess my picking technique is very similar in terms of how I'm holding the pick. But moving to bass is a few considerations. One, the strings being further apart.
Yeah.
So you've got more ground to cover there. And then the big one for me really is there's so much more aggression in how I play bass than when I play guitar. Guitar would sound really horrible if you picked it this hard. But these basses are kind of set up to just keep giving back more and more springiness as you dig in. And really, I want every hit to sound almost like a slapped note.
Yeah.
So when I'm picking, I do this on guitar to some extent, but way more on bass. I'm really picking down into the string.
I'm kind of dead
breast stroking against the next string as like a mute.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So you're actually playing right. You're not like plucking the string. You're playing through the string.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And without doing that, like I've worked with plenty of bassists who perhaps are newer to picking, and they're kind of plucking like this.
Yeah.
But there's two things that instantly present themselves as problems. One is you can't get the aggressive sound, which for some people I guess doesn't matter. But the other huge one is tuning. I find that if you pick a string, kind of, you get this huge like, ooh.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go the other way, essentially I'm kind of using this in place of my thumb to slap.
Yeah.
So the string is ricocheting off the fret, so you get that really metallic attack. But my theory is that also limits the range of motion of the string, so it doesn't kind of...
it doesn't go really sharp
you
and
get that thing, yeah.
And so that's a huge part of how to be able to play bass aggressively without having tuning nightmares.
Can you give the guys just sort of like maybe just a few notes quite slowly on one note so they can see that through the string thing? Yeah, give the guys a shot of doing that.
So I'll do it on this string.
Yeah. Right through, isn't it? Yeah. And when is that for when you do it downstroke? Because obviously at some point you're not going to be able to physically do that depending on the actual speed of the line. Would that be correct?
Yes. Yeah.
When that happens, what's the next thing that you go to?
Yeah, that is the tricky thing. To some extent, well, I'm always kind of sawing in and out of the guitar. As I start to play runs that involve upstrokes and downstrokes, I'm kind of rotating my wrist to some degree to pick either flatter to the strings or to actually kind of change this into a reverse. Like, it doesn't ever go quite as far as that.
Yeah.
But something to prevent it just becoming, which sounds really ugly.
Yeah.
You hear that.
And that is kind of tricky. So for that reason, when I can, I will downpick, because it sounds really consistent when you do that.
Is that why you do it? Is that why that downpick's there? Because of the consistency of sound, and when you switch to the alternate, it's because downpicking is just impossible within that line that you're actually trying to do.
Yeah.
Although sometimes it can be a little bit too aggressive. Sometimes you don't actually want every single picked note to be completely audible, like a kind of hammer.
Yeah.
I'm thinking if you're just playing constant, like, I don't know. You still want it to have attack, but I also want it to have a kind of rolling feel to it. So I'm not going to be going like...
Yeah. You want the accents possibly in different places as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of the way you strike the string as well, is it flat on or is it at an angle? I know earlier we were talking about Devon Townsend sometimes like angles his, doesn't it, to get that behind the beat kind of feel, kind of crunchy feel. Do you do that on bass or not? Or does it depend?
Well, I think the truth is I definitely try and pick a bit flatter than I pick on guitar.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you tend to get a lot of like if you're ultimate... That's not what you want. But if you look at the wear on my pick, it's definitely still got a kind of diagonal. So clearly it's not completely flat. And that would kind of necessitate this.
Doing that, wouldn't it? Yeah.
But a bit of flatness for me gives you a better kind of note release as well.
Yeah.
So that kind of behind the beat thing, I feel does happen, but that's partly just due to the aggression of the picking.
Yeah.
You kind of... Your initial point where the pick hits the string is actually just displacing the string, and the pick and string are kind of stuck together for a second.
Yeah.
And then it flicks away. So you
then-
get that little
spike. Should we hear the riff at half speed, and then we can actually talk about the tricky parts of this riff? So let's hear it at half speed.
All right. Something I should mention is I don't play with thick picks.
Oh, absolutely.
So this is something which is quite interesting. This is a 0.6 mil. There's a few reasons for that. One is because it would actually start to really take a toll on my wrist just from the impact coming back.
The string, yeah.
I think it would mash the strings far too much. It wouldn't sound good to my ears.
Yeah.
And another really neat benefit is it kind of almost acts like a compressor. There is a limited amount of headroom to this pick because after not very much force, it's just bending more and more.
Yeah.
So that gives you a little bit of extra consistency.
Yeah.
If I pick a bit too hard on one pick, it's going to flex a little bit more. And so the output is not going to be,
Yeah.
If I pick double as hard, it's not going to come out double as loud, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
It really helps for both consistency between pick notes on a single string and also going through the strings, which is really important because this string would sound horrible. The high strings would sound terrible with a really thick pick. They would just get completely mashed.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, I can still maintain the same aggression. Like I'm not changing how hard I'm picking on any of the strings. I'm just going.
Yeah.
And it comes out sounding very even as a result.
And if you listen to Nolly on any of the records that he's done or just you'll hear that his tone is like super consistent. Is that something that you've worked on and being always aware of, like wanting that consistent tone across the range?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like we were discussing before, like the bass needs to be present on every single note. And if you don't play it consistently, you won't have the consistency of tone. Yes, you can compress it and limit it and do whatever after the fact. But if the actual input notes have an inconsistent timbre, it's never going to cut through the mix equally on every note. So when I'm recording something for real, for a studio album, I will go sometimes bar by bar or even less if something's really tricky.
Yeah.
And I will even just visually look at the waveforms and be like, oh yeah, I picked a few notes too soft in that, so I'm going to do that again. Sometimes you wonder if it's necessary, but that's the perfectionist in me. Essentially, I wanted to be as close to a MIDI instrument as possible. My idea of being successful at playing bass on a track is it should sound just like a perfectly edited, perfectly in time, perfectly in tune instrument.
Yeah.